Today, I want to share my experience on a programming concept that proved useful in most, if not all, the positions I've had in my career. And by the end of this video, I trust you will gain a deep understanding and appreciation of this concept. Hello there, my name is Dave and I make videos on simplifying programming concepts. At a previous position, I had the task of writing a program that connects to multiple network devices and executes some commands. What the program needed to do was pretty straightforward. It needed to establish a connection to a device, log in using some credentials, executes a bunch of commands, disconnects, and based on the device type, it would pick a logging strategy and writes what it's doing. So based on device type, some of the devices will require us to write what the program is doing to a file, while for other devices, it will just simply write the output to the console. The issue here was that we had fundamentally different network devices, and for simplicity, let's say they were just routers and switches, but in reality, the devices were a little bit more diverse. Some of those devices were manufactured by a certain vendor, while the others were manufactured by a different vendor. The technologies that were used to manipulate those devices were pretty different. So for some of the devices, you needed to use Telnet, while the others, you needed to use something like SNMP. Practically, that meant the technology that you would use to manipulate a ZTE router would be different from the technology that you would use to manipulate a Cisco switch, for example. And the very commands that you would use here will be very different from the commands you would use there. Ideas. How would you approach this problem? There are always trade-offs, right? Like everything else in life, nothing is perfect. So you need to make some educated choices here. The first idea would be, let's just create independent functions, classes that encapsulate each use case. For example, you can create a function that has the sole purpose of connecting to a Cisco device using Telnet technology and log to a file, and those are the commands that you will send to the device. Or another function that connects to a ZTE router using SNMP technology and logs to the console. And those are the bunch of SNMP comments. I think in the beginning, this is definitely the way to go. You should always start simple and keep it simple stupid. The problem with this approach is that while you start working on it, or maybe after a release or two, you would start understanding more about the problem in hand, and you will see that there are parts that are duplicated. Let it be logical or code pieces, and after a certain threshold, maybe you would like to reconsider, because having duplicates in the code is not really great for the code hygiene and your own mental well-being. Duplicated code is more prone to errors. It will make refactoring much more dangerous and error-prone. It will be pretty tedious to pin down what needs to be changed and what not. Also, extending your code could be a little bit tedious here. For example, imagine that you want to introduce a new network device or a new communication protocol. Then extending this code using this approach will not be optimal. Okay, idea number two. How about using inheritance? We know from object-oriented programming that inheritance is the way to go to reuse logic, right? We normally can think of some sort of a hierarchy. We define the shared logic in one of the methods in the base class and then extend it in the child classes. Yes and no. In real-world projects, normally defining hierarchies and relationships in that sort is a bit challenging. The idea of having a class animal and a cat, a dog, that inherit from this parent class doesn't work in mature projects. Normally, and I've seen this before, if you go down this path, you will start coercing relationships to go with this hierarchy, and you will end up with some corner cases where you will have to do some tactical ifs, and you will get back to the same issue where we started, that your code will be a bit harder to reason about and for sure harder to extend. Like the requirements changed and you want to adapt to that, you want to create a new functionality, then probably inheritance will not work very well in this situation. In some situations, you would actually end up having the base class with the method, but not actually writing anything in this base method. And all the logic will be customized per class, which means that we're not really reusing anything here. Last but not least, this is not compliant with the open-closed principle of the solid principles, where classes should be closed to change but open to extension. Good news is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Turns out this is a very common problem, and some smart people already came up with a solution. If you take a step back and think of the core issue of the situation we're dealing with in our example, is that we want to pick a certain algorithm at runtime. We need to change our strategy when we deal with some peculiarities of the situation. The solution to this problem could be summed up in two steps. First, isolate what varies, those algorithms that deal with the peculiarities of the situation. And second, favor composition over inheritance. And instead of relying on hierarchies and overriding methods, we start moving and encapsulating the behavior that changes into its own encapsulation unit. This will give us the opportunity to stitch desired behaviors together like Lego blocks. Imagine that you want to come up with a completely new logging strategy. We want to log over network. We don't need to touch the existing classes. We can just come up with a new class, and this class will be right away composable with other parts of the logic. The approach we have seen in this video is an example of strategy design pattern, which is a design pattern of a family of design patterns called behavioral design patterns. A design pattern is a reusable solution to a common problem, a timely tested answer to a frequently occurring situation. That was it. Thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below.